Croydon Conversations is brought to you by Develop Croydon, a private public sector partnership that looks to promote Croydon collaboratively. And today we're delighted to be in conversation with Richard Plant. Now, Richard Plant is a well-known face to many people in Croydon. Richard is not only chairman of Develop Croydon, but is also a partner at SHW, and he's head of the Surrey, South London and Kent offices. So hi, Richard, welcome to Croydon Conversations.
Good morning, Catherine.
Good to chat to you this morning. Let's start off by just asking you, tell us a little bit about yourself. I know that you've been in Croydon for many, many years. You work here, you live here, and you have done for many, many years.
So I was born in Croydon, but I started working here in 95, so 25 years ago last month, and fairly quickly bought a house off the High Street in Wandle Road. I'm a chartered surveyor, and quite quickly I started specialising in development. And at the time, mainly what I was doing was selling old NHS hospitals. And I actually did very, very little in Croydon itself. I was in Kent, I was going over towards Bath, in Essex, all over the southeast. And hardly anything happened in Croydon. And then gradually that started to change. I was involved a lot with Tramlink, with the compensation for the land take for Tramlink around, that sort of started in 1997, 98. And then moving on towards the present day, there's obviously just been more and more sites and developments taking place in Croydon. So I've just done more and more, much closer to home, really.
And how have you seen, I mean, you've already, you've mentioned there's been a huge amount of change in the last 25 years. But I guess specifically, Develop Croydon's been going now for 10 years. What's happened in the most recent 10 years? What's the biggest change that you would say about Croydon?
Well, I think one of the things was illustrated fantastically in the Croydon News, the Develop Croydon newspaper, probably about a year ago, when here at SHW we moved from a somewhat old-fashioned ex-house at 96 Park Lane to a much more modern office at 69 Park Lane, and that happened about 13 years ago. And at the time, we took a picture from the top of the building as part of our promotional material for moving. And we then had that picture taken again about 10 years later, and then again 2 years after that. And what's striking over that period is that in the first 10 years, one or two things changed, not very much. And in that final 2 years, so probably 3 years ago now, just everything suddenly changed. And if you look at those pictures in a line, what the big thing to mention, to point out, is the pace of change now is dramatic. So, in 2000, we got the tram, which was great, a new thing, a really forward-thinking improvement to public infrastructure. But now, you look out the window and it's just, site after site, really. And they've all been, a lot of them have been carrying on all through the Corona time as well. So, even outside our window, the Taverner House scheme, the pace of that changed. We watched it being demolished probably the best part of 10 years ago. But now it's topping out at 34 stories. So it's very dramatic.
And certainly, one of the biggest changes in recent years has been the growth of the residential market in Croydon, particularly in central Croydon. Obviously, with the change of use rules that changed. And I remember, when we first started Develop Croydon, there was, literally a few hundred people that lived in the town centre. It wasn't really a living place at all. And that has now sort of changed dramatically. And I guess, with your specialism in development and particularly in residential, what do you feel about that now? Because obviously there's a lot of talk about the fact that maybe, it's oversubscribed now, that there is, far more, places being built than perhaps people need. What is the demand like? And what do you see maybe the impact of COVID might be on that situation?
Yeah, well, back in, I'm trying to think, probably about 2007, the local authority divided the town centre up into areas, East Croydon, West Croydon, the cultural quarter, all of that kind of thing, and produced master plans for each area. And their overriding master plan for the town centre was to introduce residential and people. And when I arrived in 95 and 96 sort of thing, if I walked back home from East Croydon Station at night, there was no one around. The town centre was completely dead, because it was either the office area where everybody was only there, 9 to 5 or whatever, or it was the retail area, which shut at 5:30, 6 o'clock. And there was nothing much going on. Now, I think that has changed dramatically now, with the likes of Box Park, with the new places that have opened up on Surrey Street. And it was an intentional plan to bring resi into the town centre. And that's for many good reasons. Obviously, our unique transport infrastructure, or just very impressive communication links, can benefit a market from a very, very wide area. So living in Croydon, you can, in an hour's travel, you can get to probably more places than you can from an hour from almost anywhere else. So it allows couples to work in different places, whether it's the city, the West End, Brighton, Gatwick, work all over the southeast and still live in Croydon and get there easily. So that ability to get everywhere means that the market, the pool of demand, is incredibly large, and our price point, which is cheaper than a lot of other areas, certainly cheaper than areas with a comparable travel time into the West End city, etc. Means that potentially the demand is enormous.
Okay.
And obviously housing figures are very well documented. There is a housing crisis, there is a need for more housing, and putting it in the town centre helps relieve the pressure on the green belt.
I'm interested to know what your thoughts are about this whole, the resi market and the impact of COVID. Are you seeing, much change in demand, but also house prices? I mean, how is that? What do you think the impact is that going to be? So we have got a huge number of units becoming available, a lot of flats in the town centre. What's your feeling about that?
So obviously the market paused during lockdown, and nothing happened because it was frowned upon to move, and it was very, very difficult to do any viewings or anything like that. So that has an effect really of just stalling the market, because the market needs transactions in order to determine whether it's going up or down. So if you just stop it, no one can really tell where the market's set. And then as the restrictions released, you had a 3-4 month pent-up demand that suddenly came out and started buying. And also that happened, that period traditionally is the busiest period in the housing market. Traditionally it starts slowly after Christmas, gets up to some sort of full speed during the spring and the summer as people want to move house, and then stops for the summer holidays, and then starts again, normally to a lesser extent in the autumn, and there's a bit of a panic about moving in before Christmas. But obviously this year, not only did you have that pent-up demand, but you also had an effective cancellation of the summer holiday period, or certainly merging it, and that meant that actually there was a phenomenal amount of activity of people moving, and to the point that arguably prices went up slightly. So the RICS report a very marginal increase. Now, will that carry on? I suspect probably not. So unemployment will have a dramatic effect, but that's where Croydon has some unique benefits. I mean, first of all, a lot of the apartments that you see, being built, whether you're looking at the Tide scheme, at the Tapman House scheme, Carolyn House, etc. They're all really different tenure mixes. So there's a lot of private rented sector. There's a lot of shared ownership. We've got Legal and General. We've got we've got all sorts of parties moving into different sectors. So in actual fact, the number of new flats on the market, like that are a normal size, not pocket, not just normal standard flats, is very, very low. So consequently, values have not dipped much at all.
What about the reputation of Croydon? So we've all, as Develop Croydon, been working, very hard over the last 10 years to change that. And, we believe, that it has changed for those of us that are here, experiencing it, living, working here on a daily basis. It's never as bad as the media will portray. But what's your view on where that sits at the moment and what else needs to be done?
I think it's improving. It's always very easy to be negative, particularly at an awkward time like this. And it is true to say that the Westfield journey has not put us in a terribly good position. The demise of retail, is not just a Croydon problem; it's a national problem. But obviously here, Westfield had basically prepared for the redevelopment by terminating tenancies, and it's almost a perfect storm. It's almost engineered, but obviously accidentally. And now they're going to have to replan and change the scheme for the current requirements. We all know how long that is likely to take. So the retail centre of our town is damaged. It is still functioning. Actually, more interesting shops are coming in. I think one of the bits that I've really enjoyed is the sort of renaissance of Surrey Street with Mr. Fox, Dog and Bull getting its facelift. I think if we could just see a bit more, when we see the scheme, the PA scheme coming on Exchange Square, and all the paving, the public realm improvements, Ludaquest, Green Dragon, the way all of that now knits together, art and craft bar, it's become really a destination area for people to go out at night. So I think that has changed, and just the people that you see walking on the street. I think there's a demographic change, that it is now a lot younger, and I think that is very positive. And that's partly the units, the type of accommodation that's being built. I was
going to say sort of young professionals, isn't it? It's very much.
It is.
It's become very much that type of demographic, which, if you go back, to that 10-year period, when we talked about young people, we talked about, teenagers really, coming into the town centre because of the nightlife and whatever else. And that's completely changed, hasn't it? I mean, there's some great cultural places now in the centre of Croydon, and you've just mentioned some of them, and that whole scene has completely changed.
I mean, I think, whatever you think about PD, and PD has got, it has a checkered history, if you like, but I do think we have got some of the best. I think, Leon House, in my mind, is probably the best PD, that I've seen. But we've also got, the Quarters, and we've got the Criterion, Delta Point, and things like that. Now, a lot of those, they were small flats, but a lot of them were for sale. So who buys a small flat at a relatively cheap price point, or a cheap price point in terms of London? Well, that is your young first-time buyer. So whatever you might think of it, it has enabled an enormous number of relatively young people to get on the housing ladder for the first time. And they're the sort of people that are out and about, enlivening the nighttime economy. such that it is at the moment, obviously, until 10 o'clock.
And I think what's interesting is, for people that have been have been at home during COVID and when we've been locked down, just coming back into Croydon for the first time, it's amazing how quickly it has changed, because obviously development has continued, public realm improvements are continuing, and you sort of, first time I came back into Croydon, having not been in for sort of that 3-month lockdown period, it was staggering how much had actually moved on. And it felt like a really exciting place again to be. So just sort of to finish up, you are the chair of Develop Croydon, and have been for the whole history of Develop Croydon. I'm just interested to know about what you think sort of the next few months, years, what the challenges are, and what our strengths are, and really how, again, this idea that we all created 10 years ago of working together in a collaborative way. What is the main thing that we all, as stakeholders with an interest in this borough, should be focusing on now?
Yeah, well, I think there's a number of questions there, really. But so I think our challenge is to adopt and nurture all these new residents that are going to be coming, very quickly. The 500 odd flats in the Tide scheme, they will rent out fairly quickly, just as the Carolyn House ones did. And these people need to sort of be adopted into Croydon. So I think one of the things that Develop Croydon can do, and the bid as well, is find a way of communicating with them and trying to make them feel that Croydon is their home, and convert them to be supporters of Croydon as well. And I think that will happen relatively easily. I think that one of the biggest challenges is the retail sector. I think we will see probably a reasonably successful independent retail sector coming along. So I think our independent, cafe culture type offering can continue to improve and succeed. We saw the opening of lots of independent coffee shops that really, really good, along the top of the High Street and George Street. And I think, one of the images that struck me during the Corona period was popped into Park Hill one evening just to walk home, and it was absolutely packed. There were people literally every 2 meters lying all over the grass in the heat. And you think, yes, the town centre living works here in Croydon because of the likes of Wandle Park, and because of Park Hill, and because of Croydon's, being, I think, the second greenest borough in London. So I think it can work well. I'm looking forward to seeing the Queen's Gardens refurbished as well. But I think for Develop Croydon, it's about communication and about continuing this message, and about adopting the new residents and occupiers and turning them into fans of Croydon.
And the opportunity for Croydon is, as we've all talked about in Develop Croydon meetings recently, that for Croydon being an outer London hub, when people don't want to be travelling into the centre of Croydon, perfectly placed to accommodate some of that commercial office space as well.
No, definitely. Croydon's office and business offering is enormous, and it's about flexible spaces and about lots and lots of different sizes, lots of different budgets as well. And yes, the new cycling regimes and what have you. Croydon has it's quite a populous borough. There's lots of potential employees here that can get in and out of Croydon without the need to cram on the tube. And I think the tube is potentially a real problem for the Corona time, in a way that perhaps the heavy rail and even the tram can actually do better. And hopefully we will see that. And in a way we kind of are already, but it's early days yet. It really is early days.
Okay, just want to finish with a question about the rest of the borough, because we do always tend to focus on the centre of Croydon, and there's a very good reason for that. But I know, and I know that in your experience, you're doing a lot of work in some of the what I call the district centres. And there's a lot of development opportunities still out there, isn't there? So it's not that development opportunities have stopped. There are those in our district centres as well.
No, there certainly are. I mean, if you look at Purley at the moment, there's a relatively large scheme coming up on the on kind of the roundabout near the library. There's another scheme coming forward, probably for about 160 units, just at the bottom of the Purley Way. Quite a lot going on in Coulsdon. There's been obviously a lot of development around the station, primarily by Oakwood, but there's a couple of other schemes there. So no, it's that everywhere really,
and north of the borough as well. I mean, I'm thinking, London Road around Thornton Heath Pond changed dramatically.
Well, London Road has been redeveloped extensively. I mean, on Thornton Heath Ponds, I've been involved in 5 sites myself. And they're all of them bar one at the moment are all under construction. I was up in Upper Norwood the other day, and the same up there. It's all changing, and obviously it's interesting. It's a bit of a surprise because there's so many areas that perhaps you haven't been to for a while. So no, it's good to get out and about and have a look. But no, it's all genuinely positive. But we could just do with getting the retail offering sorted out.
Yeah. Well, I guess, as you said, we're not alone. Retail is suffering anyway, and was suffering anyway before we then all had to cope with COVID-19. Certainly there is still a retail offer here, and it's exciting to think that at some point it might change. We're just waiting to see when that might be. But it's been really great to catch up with you, Richard. Is there any one last final thought you'd just like to share?
Just really, I think getting out, supporting the local economy, and continuing to shout about Croydon, and also being appreciative of what has already happened. It really is quite remarkable. And I think as we see the RNF scheme and stuff like that start to come online, there's a lot more to do. But no, thanks very much.
Great. Lovely to talk to you, Richard. Thanks very much.
Thank you.